Good morning, everyone, and happy springtime. As we head towards summer, some of you may be currently recruiting for open positions. Some may be preparing for the fall recruiting season, and some of you may have hiring plans, may not have hiring plans, but want to explore these topics for future recruitment. Wherever you land, this webinar is for you. Today, we're going to cover the concept of equity in the hiring process and considerations for your recruitment procedures in a way that will create success for all. Thank you so much for making time to be here today and committing part of your day to professional development. I promise to make this half hour a good use of your time. So before I dive in, let's take a moment to review today's housekeeping rules. For tech issues, please use the chat feature on your screen. I can help troubleshoot in the moment. For questions that apply to all audiences, please use the Q&A feature. Keep in mind that not everyone in this audience is in your industry, so please submit questions that are relevant to all types of employers. I'll send out the slides post-presentation with the resources and a post-webinar survey link. Please know that those responses come straight to me for review, so please take 5 minutes and let us know how we can best serve you. As a quick introduction, my name is Lindsay Smith. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director for Employer and Community Connections in the University of Washington Career and Internship Center. I've worked in the center for the past 6.5 years, and if this is your first contact with the Career and Internship Center, we are the centralized career center on campus that provides career guidance and programming for students of most majors and school years. I attended college on the other side of the state at Gonzaga University, but love supporting Huskies here in Seattle. You can contact me at lsmith8@uw.edu, and I'll be happy to help. Today, we'll review a number of topics included in the process of recruiting and hiring candidates. After an overview, we'll discuss developing the position, writing the job description, recruiting practices, application review, interview protocols, and an introduction to onboarding. At next week's webinar, we'll take a deeper look at onboarding and retention. Let's start with an overview. Before we can dive into the presentation, I invite you to read through the premise of today's training. We cannot talk through any content unless we assume the following 3 bullet points are true. I assume that you are here because your priority is to recruit and hire a more diverse workforce that feels welcomed, valued, and included, and because you understand that existing practices in these 3 areas may exclude or disadvantage marginalized populations. In order to create lasting change, we must acknowledge that the process of creating that change is lasting as well, and will require the investment of significant time, energy, and resources. But that's okay. And your being here is a positive step that will certainly create impact. While considering that premise, we have a few goals today. We'll talk through best practices and standards for each step of the hiring process to offer considerations for adjusting your organization's processes. I'll share the why behind these current best practices, the context, research, or reasoning to help magnify the importance of DEI work and provide credibility. And lastly, throughout this slide deck, you'll see several links to different resources. As I mentioned earlier, I'll share these slides with you post-presentation, and you're welcome to click on the links for different sources that will provide further information about how you can change your hiring practices for the better. Here's where we begin. How do you develop a position and market it in an equitable way? Well, it's nearly impossible to think about it through the lens of every single type of population. So my key takeaway from this slide for you is that you should distill your position down into only that which is necessary for people to know. This might be the position purpose, the function of the role to the business, and the skills needed to complete the role. You'll want to think through the qualities your ideal candidate possesses prior to posting the role. This helps you to create a scoring rubric, which I'll talk about later, and helps you to proactively eliminate bias. Lastly, think beyond what the employee may have accomplished during their time in school. Where they attended college, their major, and their GPA are not sole indicators of knowledge. No matter where the student went to school, UW or elsewhere, um, that isn't necessarily something that should be considered, or that should be a indicator that you may not hire someone or consider them. Also, GPA has declined over the years as an indicator used in recruitment and in application review. As again, it's not necessarily indicative of the student's abilities or skill sets for the role. Once you know what you're hiring for, it's time to communicate that to your applicants. Think of your position description in 5 parts. The position descriptions introduce to candidates: 1, your organization; 2, the goal of the job as it relates to the success of your organization; and 3, the function of the job. It can also include 4, desired qualifications, and 5, position benefits. I'll add here that it is a great time to emphasize any policies your government may have in place or is working on that make your workplace more equitable. Many of you have asked in the registration survey about things that are important to the current generation, so I've highlighted a few things here that Gen Z really cares about, like social impact, salary transparency, and equal pay. I have linked to 2 recordings of past webinars we've hosted that dive into these topics. In the job description, I'll also encourage you to highlight features of the position as they relate to DEI, or diversity and equity initiatives. For example, will this role require you to be knowledgeable about DEI practices? If this role doesn't necessarily relate to the DEI work of your department, does your organization still have a diversity statement or commitment to DEI practices that the employee should know about upfront? I'll also note to keep in mind minimum qualifications versus desired qualifications. Over the years, it's really become important for employers to distill down what really is a minimum qualification and what the candidate absolutely needs to have and needs to know in order to be successful in the job, and moving certain skill sets or knowledge levels to desired qualifications if it is not critically essential, but they have a high level of that when coming into the role. This will help equalize the opportunities for candidates as they come in if the minimum qualifications truly show what is minimally required rather than what is desired. Here's a sample job description with DEI commitment and some position responsibilities related to DEI work. So we have used this. This has been one of our job descriptions in the past, starting off with our diversity statement, and which really shows how we prioritize that in our work and in our center, which shows to candidates up front our commitment to that space. In summary, your job description should do the following 4 things: introduce candidates to the job in your organization, describe the position purpose and your organization's work towards equity and inclusion, clarify your must-have qualifications as well as skills that will be learned in the role, and using gender-neutral language, and review the description for any exclusive terms or verbiage. If you're not familiar with gender-neutral language, I'd like to pull from the European Parliament, which has an entire guidebook on this. Quote, gender-neutral language is a generic term covering the use of non-sexist language, inclusive language, or gender-fair language. The purpose of gender-neutral language is to avoid word choices which may be interpreted as biased, discriminatory, or demeaning by implying that one sex or social gender is the norm. Using gender-fair and inclusive language also helps reduce gender stereotyping, promotes social change, and contributes to achieving gender equality. Unquote. This might look like replacing masculine words like confident, determined, and decisive with words like certain, steadfast, and conclusive. Or feminine words like supportive, cooperative, and understanding with helpful, partnership, and comprehension. Okay, so you've got your JD all set, and you're ready to toss it into the ether of the internet and attract some candidates. Let's talk about how you can make your recruiting practices more equitable. The key here is to widen your candidate pool. Does your company have a standard of attending career fairs only at certain schools, or posting their jobs to LinkedIn, or only recruiting during certain seasons? All of these standards may be inequitable. Consider casting a wide net and even recruiting year-round to ensure a diverse candidate pool. When you recruit year-round and have a wide net, you'll want to ensure you don't fall into the trap of having a cookie-cutter, copy-paste type of message. Gen Z sees right through that, and they like tailored messaging. They want to know that they feel like they'll be a good fit for you. But you don't want to tokenize diverse communities or only contact candidates because of their identities. To give you a good illustration of how you might consider going about this, avoid phrases like, our organization is looking to hire Black women for our internship. When you tell an unrepresented minority that you're messaging them because they're a minority, you offend and tokenize them. All students prefer to be hired for their skills or expertise. So tell them why you're interested in talking with them from that perspective, and consider tailoring your message to show how you can support them in your workplace through mentors or a diverse leadership team, or the value your organization puts on DEI work, etc. Candidates want to see that you value their unique experiences and that they'll be supported with pathways for progression. I've added some links in here that you'll have access to later. Handshake has created a really powerful guide about contacting underrepresented students in Handshake. Also, we have links to the UW department list and student organization list that you can use when reaching out to different groups of students at UW. Leveling the playing field with virtual events. Virtual events are still around, and data shows that their value in leveling the playing field by providing equitable opportunities to connect with recruiters is powerful. Handshake published a report in 2021 surveying students, and while this data is a few years old, the equitable nature of virtual events still applies. The results show that virtual recruiting unlocks equity and accessibility, leveling the playing field for underrepresented students. In fact, women, students of color, and neurodiverse students found virtual events and interviews to be less anxiety-inducing, easier to balance, and more accessible. These charts here demonstrate that about having the setting less intimidating, should have more flexibility, easier to prepare as the students know who they'll be talking to or who they'll be interacting with, and more convenient for them. And also on the right, virtual versus in-person comfort and preference in 2021. Again, this data is old, but overall, the theme of accessibility and equity still stands. And again, virtual recruiting is still a valuable tool in your recruiting tool belt. While virtual career fairs have decreased over the past few years, although we do still host a few every year, students still appreciate virtual opportunities to interact with employers. Last fall, NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, partnered with Ripple Match to host a webinar with solutions and insights for recruiters. They shared that for recruiters, virtual recruitment is leveraged most often to reach diverse candidates and host virtual events. For virtual events, students are most likely to attend company-hosted info sessions, which we do recommend considering. Handshake has also shared their Gen Z hiring trends for 2025, which includes some tips. Employers on Handshake hosted more than 10,000 virtual events between January and October 2024, and found the most popular timeframes for students include midday on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So if you have done away with virtual events, consider bringing a few back. And both of those reports or recordings of reports are links here that you'll have access to later. So you've got some candidates and some applications to review. What now? The main thing to keep in mind here is bias. We're all biased people, and we all have work to do when it comes to eliminating our personal biases. When hiring, scoring rubrics can help maintain a level of neutrality. Rubrics can help you assign numbers to score a candidate's aptitude for a job. When building your rubric, you'll want to build in an element of add versus fit. Qualifications should be assessed from a perspective of what the candidate is adding to your company, not how they'd fit in with who's already there. You'll also want to find evidence in the candidate's application materials to support your scoring, and acknowledge and move past your biases about a candidate's schooling, experiences, or skills. Again, we all have bias and it may show up in this process. So acknowledging it, seeing it, and then moving past it is important. This is a sample scoring rubric, which a few of you have asked to see in the registration survey. I won't walk through this in depth here, but it's a great resource for your organization to review after today, and think about it in context of the jobs you're hiring for at your company. And now you're ready to interview some folks. What can you do to make the interview process as equitable as possible? As I mentioned, use a rubric to score candidates' interviews, assessing their aptitude for the job. Just like with reviewing applications with a rubric, also use a rubric to score interviews. Ask standard, fair questions to all candidates that avoid bias and discrimination. Ask behavioral questions that assess knowledge and skills rather than hypotheticals. Be honest about your organizational work culture regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. I will also mention a good tip is to ask every candidate the same questions, just to keep it equitable. I know some candidates at the end may say, is there anything you'd like me to clarify, or what other questions you have for me? We recommend asking the exact same questions to every candidate so that it's a completely fair process. Here's an example of an interview. You might ask someone if you are evaluating their aptitude for communication. Consider this question. In your previous experience, how have you communicated with a population of people different from yourself? Provide specific examples of how and when they communicated with a population different from them. Demonstrates the ability to convey information and ideas in a manner appropriate to the audience. Describes the ability to ask clarifying questions, to understand concerns, and deliver accurate information. Think about competencies relevant to your job and how you might tailor your question to allow candidates to speak to their past experiences while allowing you to get a sense of who they are. We've wrapped up some of my top tips on the hiring space. Next week, our second part of this webinar will cover onboarding, but we'll take a quick look here. Develop an onboarding plan to orient new employees to the organization and the job. How will they be introduced to the role and to the organization? How will they be trained on their tasks and set up for success? How will expectations be shared with them? How will they know that how will they know how they'll be measured on success, and when things will be expected of them? That's really important, and to plan all of that before they show up. Provide opportunities for new employees to build connections with current staff. Consider opportunities for new employees to connect either with their team or the office at large as appropriate. You could do one-on-one meet and greets. You could do a team lunch, introduce them at an all-staff meeting. There are multiple ways to do this, but that will help them feel included early on, and as available as possible, allow the team to get to know them as well, even if they don't work for that with them directly. And be sure to discuss with your new hire your organization's DEI initiatives. Invite their input, feedback, and participation, as achieving DEI requires consistent effort and investment. And lastly, create an individual engagement plan, including regular check-ins to provide support and guidance. This is important, especially at the beginning, so the new hire feels supported, they can ask the questions they need, and those expectations can be kept in check. Let's wrap up now with some next steps. So you'll receive an email this week with the slides and follow-up resources. An online recording will become available on our website within 1 week. My plan is to do that by tomorrow. And a post-webinar survey will be included in the email. We'd love it if you could take that survey as your content and responses will inform future webinars. Also, in a second, I'll show you our website with all of these resources and more in our diversity and inclusion toolkit. And if you're interested in this work, I could encourage you to go check that out. Also, part 2 of the series is next week, equitable onboarding and retention practices. So we'll go into more detail on onboarding and in retention. So we've hired your candidate. Now, how do you onboard them successfully and then retain them so they stay with you? That's next Thursday, May 15th, 10 to 10:30, again on Zoom. And you can learn more on our website and register on Zoom, and I'll show you in a second how to get there. We also have a summer job and internship fair. So are you currently hiring? Are you not hiring but looking to maintain a recruiting pipeline? Join us at our summer career fair. So it is on Wednesday, June 25th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the Hub, our Husky Union building. This is the first week of summer quarter, so students are on campus. We get a lot of alum, we get a lot of recent grads. It is a great spot to either promote internships for the next year, jobs you're hiring for right now, any type of opportunity. I would recommend coming. Again, I'll show you how to find that on our website. So before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to show you that website. We also have a LinkedIn page, which is where we post a lot of our career fairs and engagement opportunities. So I'd recommend checking that out. So before we go to Q&A real quick, I want to show our diversity and inclusion toolkit. So this can be found if you go to careers.uw.edu and then click on For Employers. This is our employer page. And then at the bottom here, Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit. And here you'll see a lot of the themes we've discussed today and that we'll discuss next week. So we have develop positions, recruit applicants, application review and interviewing, creating an onboarding plan, welcome new staff and retain new hires. So on each of these pages, you'll find more information about developing position descriptions and also references to articles that detail some of the research that we have found. And you'll also find just additional resources that will help you as you go through the process of developing position descriptions. Again, there's a page for recruiting applicants here. We also at the bottom of each have our information sources. We have application review and interviewing right here, sample rubric, biases, asking questions. So a lot of great expansive information on what we talked about today. So I highly recommend taking a look at this. Create an onboarding plan like we talked about. We'll talk about next week as well. That is really helpful. And then again, welcoming new staff and retaining new hires, which we'll get into next week. This page also has some additional resources for you, which I would recommend. So again, that is at our website, and then for employers, and then diversity and inclusion toolkit. You can also see how to create an internship, other campus contacts, all of our career fairs, recruiting at UW, and Handshake. If you want to attend a career fair or summer fair, you'll find it right here. Here's some more information. You can click here to attend. That goes into Handshake. All right. So we'll do some Q&A now. We have a question in the Q&A, which we will take a look at now. Let's see here.